Hello, my name is Chivariak Khus. I'm a Grants and Research Associate with Methodist Healthcare Ministries. Today I'm going to be delivering a workshop on logic models, strategic and innovative tools for measuring and communicating program benefits. This workshop was originally developed for a live audience with some participatory components developed into it. But we will try and incorporate that as well into this presentation for the web. But obviously, I think we'll integrate some pausing components into it. The workshop consists essentially of a theoretical component as well as exercises towards the end. And hopefully we'll also be able to incorporate a wrap-up component at the end. Let me start by saying that the discourse on evaluating program success has been growing here in the United States. A recent article in a Foundation newsletter reported that 70% of nonprofits have now self-reported that they are making some attempt to measure program outcomes. I also wanted to start out by highlighting grants, and I'll be discussing a lot about grants because in my opinion, the grant is often the starting point for most programs, and if you can try and understand an organization and a program in a linear sense, in a sequential order, 1, 2, 3, etc., things would usually start with the grant. And I wanted to point out initially some of the common mistakes that I see when people write grants, and they can be broken up into 3 essential categories. One, their application is actually non-responsive, meaning that when they apply for a particular grant, they actually don't respond to the request at hand. They simply submit their own position, paper, their grant, their own organizational needs rather than to meet the request of the donor entity or the foundation requesting the proposals. Second, the organizations can sometimes do a little bit of the opposite, which is to try and do everything that the donor requests without necessarily taking into consideration their own organizational interest, needs, plan. And then third, they fail to write a comprehensive and integrated document because remember that the grant, again, is a part of the organization, and every grant has a clear beginning, middle, and end. However, the organization will continue to function even beyond that specific grant period. So it's always keeping in mind the fluid nature of your organization. And when you're writing these grants, these subcomponents, you always have to keep that in mind as well. So what is a good grant? A good grant can be considered a good work plan, outlines key work deliverables, standards, activities. It's also a monitoring and evaluation framework. So it highlights the essential activities that will be done and what will be measured periodically, as well as at the end of the program to try and demonstrate success, as well as to understand lessons learned. A good grant also complements, and it is an extension of an organizational strategic plan. I think I wanted to highlight that as well because one has to always try and reinforce the organizational plans and framework that are in place. In that sense, when we're developing a grant, we must always understand and research existing documentation as to maintain continuity with the original organizational plans in its most basic form, certainly referencing the organizational's vision and mission. And again, my last point would be to reinforce a continuous process, because your organization and its interactions with the community is an ongoing process, and so you must always keep that in mind as well. The workshop objectives, essentially they're broken into 4 components. To know the relationship between self-awareness and planning. Grant writing is planning. And the importance of participation. And then finally to touch upon the actual components of the logic model, to differentiate between the process as embodied in the logic model and the activities, to provide a clear framework for understanding what you are doing. So let's get started with the first part, which is knowing relationships between self-awareness and planning. Now, when I first started this workshop, logic models, I actually focused a lot more on the logic model without touching upon planning and self-awareness. But I found that a lot of the people that I was working with was having great difficulties, and this component is meant to address some of those difficulties. And what I want to highlight, first of all, is that there are certain objectives for this particular component here, which is to review 2 important theories for self-awareness, additional challenges to big picture thinking, and again, the continual process of change. Going back to planning and self-awareness, in a general sense, when you look at your ability to plan, it is obviously related back to your ability to see and what you see. And that, based on what you see, will determine how you plan. So let's try to expand upon that. If we look at the model of communication, what you will start to notice is that it's a fairly complicated model. It's not, just 2 squares, but as you can see here, it consists of 4 squares and a lot of different components. I'm not necessarily trying to get you to understand the model in its precise form, just trying to get you to recognize that communication is a more complicated process of developing a message and trying to send that message to the receiver. It's a complicated process, and as you see, there are also some environmental factors, such as what Shannon has identified here as the noise source that may interfere with your communication. I'll give you a sort of practical, real-world phenomena using feedback as a process of interpretation. So when feedback is given, it can be received in either, usually one of these 2 ways, which is it can be received as insult or feedback. In the sense of when you provide feedback, someone can also interpret it negatively, and in that sense, when you interpret something negatively, you don't take a constructive interpretation, and then it falls into a different category, and then you have miscommunication. Although the intent of the sender could very much have been positive in the sense of trying to provide